Wife demands husband fire nanny in shocking twist. Story 1. My jealous wife demands I fire the new nanny because they were enemies back in high school. I, male 30s, live with my wife, who's in her 30s as well. We both work full-time jobs and we have 3 kids, who are 3, 6, and 7. I used to work from home with flexible hours, but I've been offered a promotion which requires me to go to work in person. The pay increase is really significant, so my wife and I agreed I should take the promotion and hire a part-time nanny for our kids. I got in touch with the nanny agency, and they matched us up to someone who lives local. They only told us her first name, which was a really common name anyway. But for the sake of storytelling, we'll call her Sarah. I spoke to Sarah on the phone, and she seemed really nice. We arranged a day for her to come over and meet my wife and the kids, and for us to show her around the house. When they came around and we met her, it turned out that my wife already knew Sarah. It was really awkward. I wasn't sure how they knew each other until afterwards. My wife told me that back when she was in high school, her boyfriend at the time cheated on her with who was in her class. She wasn't enthusiastic about it, but my wife didn't seem to have a problem with Sarah being our nanny at first. Our kids love her, she has lots of experience, and she's available when we need her. After a couple of weeks, with pretty much no issues, my 2 oldest kids came to me and started telling me that they don't want Sarah to come back. I asked them why, and they said that she's evil. I ask what they think she's evil for, and my 6-year-old starts crying and says that Sarah is mean and wants to hurt mommy. I talked to my wife in private, and at first she said she had no idea what the kids were talking about, and that must be because of something that Sarah did. It when I pressed it, my wife admitted that she told the kids that Sarah was evil. She said she knows it was a ridiculous plan, but she was hoping that I'd fire her. My wife asked me to fire the nanny because their history makes her uncomfortable. I asked why it wasn't an issue before, and my wife said she just needed to think about it, and she decided Sarah has to go. I told my wife that we can find another nanny, but until then, there's no reason to get rid of Sarah, and that she was out of line for trying to weaponize the kids against her when Sarah is no danger to anyone. My wife disagreed and said that we need to just fire Sarah ASAP and hire a temporary babysitter until we can find another nanny. She said that she wasn't weaponizing the kids, she was just setting boundaries. This turned into a really heated argument, and I called my wife into here and controlling and told her that she needs to go to therapy. My wife said I'm being inconsiderate of her feelings and I need to put myself in her shoes. This is one of our biggest arguments in a very long time, and I just want a neutral opinion on whether or not I was wrong. Everyone sucks here. Your wife shouldn't be talking smack about Sarah to your kids, but you also shouldn't be insisting that Sarah remain hired. There are plenty of other people who I'm sure would be equally as nice and fun as Sarah, with the added bonus that this one won't have painful beef with your wife. Everyone sucks here. Opus, this is just ridiculous. Your wife was way out of line to say to the kids and try to use them like that. And it sounds like she did some actual, hopefully just temporary, emotional damage in doing so. But she's right that Sarah needs to go immediately. Why the heck would you want to keep your wife in a clearly uncomfortable position, much less continue to keep your kids in this situation? Keeping Sarah around for a couple more weeks just because you don't want to bother finding someone to fill in until you and your wife find a permanent replacement is a terrible idea. And it shows your wife and your kids that you don't give a hoot about their feelings. Save your kids and your marriage, and Sarah, frankly. Any more of this dealing with crap. Everyone sucks here. Your wife got cheated on by her ex with the woman who was in your lives and in your kids' lives. The sensible thing to do would have been to say right away, okay, we'll find someone else. You are being inconsiderate of her feelings. That makes you a jerk. Your wife should have never used your kids the way that she did. That was beyond the pale. That makes her a jerk. All in all, it means you all suck. Well, who do you think is the jerk? Opus or his wife? Please let us know. He has an idea. How about Opus's wife tells the kids that she lied to them about Sarah? Story 2. You need to think long and hard about whether you want this job. Okay, context. I work in it in a very small area where everybody knows each other in one way or another. So networking with people is very important. I got a new job in a private school, partly because I knew the consultant acting as hiring manager at the time, but also because he knew I had skills in Azure and its many cloud components, which was the direction he envisioned the school going. Great stuff. I can do the migration no problem as I've gone through it twice at previous companies. I started just before the summer holidays, which were 9 weeks at this school, so I spent a bit of time getting to grips with the equipment, network, and just generally settling in. It was a small team of myself, 2 desktop guys, 1 part-time, and the consultant and manager who worked 3 part days, usually 10 a.m. to 2 or 3 p.m. After about 3 months, the school hired a permanent manager and dropped the consultant after he had handed over all of his responsibilities. Things continued as normal. I worked away on getting the prerequisites in place while juggling some other project, like managed printing and network upgrade. Seemed great, although I was being pulled away from my club tasks more than I'd like. but figured it was just how things were here with such a small team. Jump forward to December. My 6-month probation was done, so I asked the manager, let's call her D, when we could have a meeting to discuss how things have been and sign off on my probation. She kept putting it off with generic excuses, and it ended up happening in mid-January, when she absolutely destroyed me. Instead of talking to me like a reasonable human being, she held up all these microaggressions and spent over 30 minutes unloading them onto me, absolutely crushing my motivation. She also said she doesn't believe the cloud is the right way to go, and that I need to be better at on-premise infrastructure and networking. I specifically said during my interviews that networking is my weakest area, and that I specialize in cloud computing. So essentially, the role I'm supposed to be doing has changed entirely to one that I'm not good at. She's used this as a way to suggest extending my probation, while she creates a new role for me that's more fitting, as I don't have the networking skills she's looking for. I was visibly upset, and she left me for a minute. But just before she left, she said, you need to think long and hard about if you want this job, because right now you're not performing well enough to keep it. I sat there for about 20 minutes, alone inside Rumiroff's office. Thoughts went through my head, doubting myself, worrying about losing my apartment I bought just 6 months ago, if I lost this job, worrying what my family would think, and just generally how I'd deal with what I felt like was an inevitability. I tried my best with everything I did, and she still wasn't happy. So I thought about what she said. Do I want this job? No. So that night, I signed up with all the local job agencies, frequently checked job sites. And all the time I was at work, I acted like she'd helped me see my errors, and that I was working on them to prove myself to her. Actually, I couldn't stand her, and I couldn't stand being in the same room as her. I hadn't taken any of my annual leave days, as I had no money after spending all my savings on my apartment. So I didn't see the point in taking time off to sit around. She nagged me about this constantly, saying I'd lose it if it weren't taken, blah, 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 like I didn't already know how holidays work. I booked a big block of 3 weeks at the end of May, as we had family coming to visit. This is relevant later. About 2 months later, I booked a couple days holiday to attend an interview. Obviously, I just told her I fancied a long weekend. I got the job. Not only was it more engaging and relevant to my areas of expertise, but it was a tasty $7,000 pay raise, with a bonus scheme up to 25% annually. Sweet. I come back in on Monday, ready to hand my notice in. But she's booked a meeting with me while I was off for 10 a.m. to discuss my new role. I have my notice in an envelope, and I bring that to the meeting. She starts with pretty much saying, you've gotten a bit better, but still not good enough for this job, so I'd like to propose. I cut her off, and I hand her the envelope. She opens it, reads it, and says, oh, okay, and, She says, well, you know this period is a month, so you'll find our date would be the 8th of June. I counter with, actually, I think you'll find that while on my probation period. It's actually only 2 weeks, which brings it to the 25th of May, which is also a public holiday, as is the 24th, so my last day is actually the 23rd of May. She tries to say that I'd passed probation, but I remind her of the letter I signed, agreeing to the extension, and that I hadn't signed any contract for this new rule yet. I did it back and forth, and she finally concedes. I also remind her that I had almost the entirety of my annual leave, which has to be paid to me when I leave, as my finish date was before they were to be taken. As the school was going through a big cost-saving exercise, this would look really bad on her. She asked me to take them instead of working my notice, which I declined. I'd rather tolerate her for 8 more days and get paid for a full month's pay on top of my normal salary. She reluctantly agreed and said she's going to talk to HR and let them know. On the way out of the meeting, I thanked her for helping me out in January. She looked at me confused, so I reminded her that I needed to think long and hard about whether I wanted this job. And I decided that no, I didn't, and I found a much better package elsewhere. Now I have my own office, complete with coffee machine and mini fridge, staff who work with me on projects, and time to work on Azure features like I'm supposed to, all while getting paid considerably more. Thanks, Dee. P.S. She got the boot 3 months after I left. Apparently, she clashed with a lot of the teaching staff with her management style. Guess I wasn't the only one who didn't get along with her. Story 3. Am I the jerk for wanting to spend time with my wife instead of babysitting my little sister? I, 24 male, and my wife recently had our 5-year anniversary. We planned to go to a nice restaurant, then ride in a hot air balloon, and then go to a lake in our ex. I was going to buy her flowers and all. Then out of the blue, one day before our anniversary, I get a text from my mom demanding me to babysit my sister for a week, while she and my dad go visit my aunt, who recently got diagnosed with leukemia. Now, I love my sister. We're 18 years apart, but are still closer than ever. She has a bit of a mental challenge, but otherwise is a pretty normal kid. I was debating whether to say yes, but I didn't want a kid, and so while I was having a date with my wife, so I politely declined and didn't get an answer, so I thought I was okay. The next day we're at the restaurant when my phone starts buzzing like crazy. I check it, and it's filled with texts from my mom and dad. They're calling me all sorts of names and saying that they showed up at my house, only for it to be empty. Now they're ignoring me. When I write to them, I haven't gotten an answer. Am I the jerk? Edit. My wife and I also have to work from then half of those days. Me and my wife have known each other since we were kids and started dating when we were teenagers. My sister is currently staying with a family friend who we've known all of our lives. The friend has 2 kids who are very close to my sister. The family friend said she wouldn't mind keeping her for the week, as she gets a break from her twins, and encouraged me to relax. Edit. My aunt is not in critical condition. She's doing fine. She also lives far away, and it takes a couple of hours to get to her. 3 hours and a little more due to stops and other things, so it takes about 4 minutes, 5 hours probably. Update: I've gone over to the friend's house and gotten them food for the congester. I can clearly see that my sister enjoys the twins' company, and the friend doesn't work, so I intend to keep her there. However, the friend informed me that my parents were talking bad about me and my wife in her messages. She told me that they were berating me for being a bad son and that my wife probably convinced me to stay away from an important situation. I intend to speak to them about this once they get back. I don't want to intrude when my aunt has leukemia. Not the jerk. You had plans. You politely declined, with notice. You are not your sister's keeper. On them to find a sitter, and they had plenty of time to do so, but they failed to do that. I hope you had a lovely anniversary in spite of it all. Edit. Even with the info that your aunt was diagnosed with leukemia, you're not the jerk. It was still on them to either make other plans or communicate with you at all, rather than making demands. If they chose to go just 1 day later, then you could have decided if you'd be willing to keep your sister for a week. There were workarounds and other options. They just chose to ignore all of them. Opus politely declined, and yet they still showed up at the house and are calling him all sorts of names. To me, this is proof that they didn't want him to babysit their sister. They were looking to dump their sister off, regardless of what measures they had to go to accomplish it. Not the jerk by a long shot. Story 4. By all means, taste your words. I used to work as a food receiver in a retirement home kitchen. I won't say the name, but I will say it sounds vaguely Nordic. When I took over as food receiver in the primary kitchen, didn't have much training. I was just told, help the previous guy, you know the most, job is yours now. Over the next almost 8 years, got that place maximized for peak use of space. Every now and then we'd get a new head chef, and they always made the mistake of trying to run it like a restaurant. Usually in about 2 weeks, they'd realize that it was a different vibe and tone and adjust accordingly. Had a great head chef as a boss for about 5 years. He knew that since deliveries were food, and to some degree perishable, my schedule needed to be a little fluid and flexible to account for late deliveries, while not having me rack up overtime. We worked out a great system, where I basically set my own hours, got everything done. Fast forward to a regime change. Head chef was a tool, but with him came a woman, whose job title was never told to any of us in the kitchen. We were just told she outranked all of us. First thing she did was decide I would no longer have a food schedule. My shifts would be posted on the board, like all the others, weeks in advance. I didn't like it, but okay, fair enough. Cut to about 2 weeks later. I had to leave early for a dentist appointment that had been submitted and approved months ago. I reminded her the day before and the day of. Day after, she gives me a dressing down and a written reprimand for leaving before end of scheduled shift. She told me she didn't care what happened before. She never had papers for this request. Luckily for me, the head of the entire dining department, above head chef, told her that she had been given all those time off approved papers when she started, and if my shift didn't reflect my pre-approved leaving early, it was her fault for not paying attention. Unluckily, she decided to take it out on me, saying that, from now on, once schedule is posted, no changes, unless it's in writing, and signed by both of us, minimum of 2 days prior. No exceptions. I looked at the calendar and saw I'd get to have fun and get payback. See, being a food receiver, a monthly job of mine was to do end-of-month inventory on all food, average, cleaning items. I had actually created the inventory paperwork myself, so instead of being alphabetical, the items were all listed together based on which area they were in. Dishwasher, chemical closet, freezer, dry food storage, soda syrup room, etc. Meaning after a few months, I could go room to room quickly and be done in less than 2 hours. Catch was, it had to be done either last thing, last day of a month, or first thing, first day of a month, and could not do 2 in the same month, with no weekend deliveries. I worked Monday through Friday. Now under the old cool-headed chef, if I had to do it on a Saturday or Sunday, I'd just come in and do it, then leave early on a slow day, canceling extra hours. And lo and behold, this was one of those months where inventory would have to be done on a Saturday or Sunday. Days she had me down as off on the calendar. I grinned like Tim Curry in The Grinch, or in Home Alone 2, and I waited. Sure enough, last Friday of the month, she asks me, which day are you coming into inventory? I told her I wasn't, I was scheduled off. She goes into a tirade about, it's your job. You don't tell me no, I'll have you written up, etc. I calmly told her, making this schedule was her job and responsibility, not mine. This earned me, I don't care what this schedule says, you're coming in this weekend. To which I sweetly and sarcastically asked if she had a paper signed by both of us, and dated no later than yesterday, about us agreeing to the switch. You know, I said, the policy you created when you got called out by head office for not properly handling my scheduled early shift. If smartphones had been common around 2009, I would have taken a pic of her face. I found out from Weekend Crew it took her almost an entire day to do it herself. That was the first of many times she found out that fun way that about half the tasks I did under old regime were technically not required by my work vision. I just did them when I had extra time to help boss that I respected.